The air was cold and heavy with smoke. Shadows danced on the broken walls of the old marketplace. Kara crouched low behind the remains of a stone stall, pressing her back to the crumbling wall. Her small hands trembled as she clutched a silver charm tied to a thin piece of string, the only thing left from her family. Her ears twitched at the sound of boots striking the ground. Heavy and sharp voices echoed through the narrow streets, speaking in the harsh tongue of the soldiers. They were hunting. They were always hunting, and tonight she knew they were looking for her. Her home was gone, burned to ashes. Her parents were gone, taken by the soldiers. Her younger brother, only 6 seasons old, had been dragged away 2 nights ago. Kara had run, she had hidden. But the soldiers never stopped searching. She pressed herself lower, breathing as quietly as she could. Every sound in the night seemed louder, every creak, every shifting shadow. Her heart pounded like a drum inside her chest. She thought she was alone until she heard it, a soft, almost gentle whisper. "Don't move." The voice was low, steady, and unlike the harsh voices she had heard all her life. She froze, eyes wide, her gaze darting toward the dark corner beside the wall. From the shadows, a figure stepped forward. Tall, broad-shouldered, his face partly hidden beneath a hood. The glint of his eyes caught the dim light, and Kara saw something strange in them. Not cruelty, not hunger for a bounty, something warmer, calmer. "Don't look back," the voice said again. She didn't know why, but she obeyed. He stepped closer, his movements silent despite the rubble underfoot. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said. Kara's lips parted, but no words came out. She had been told humans were dangerous, wild, unpredictable. Yet this one didn't feel like a threat. He extended a hand, rough and scarred. "If you stay here, they'll find you," he murmured. "If you come with me, maybe they won't." Her mind screamed not to trust him, but her body was already moving. She placed her small hand in his. They slipped through the ruins like shadows. The man's grip was firm, but not painful, guiding her quickly and quietly. Soldiers passed nearby, their armor clinking, their voices sharp with cruel laughter. Kara's breath caught in her throat as one turned his head toward their hiding place, but the human moved in front of her, blocking her from sight. He stood so still that for a moment she thought he had vanished into the night. Only when the soldiers moved on did he glance back at her. "Stay close," he whispered. He led her through an alley that twisted and turned like a maze. Broken signs hung from walls, and the smell of smoke and oil filled the air. Kara's feet hurt, but she didn't dare complain. The human didn't speak much. But each time she stumbled, he steadied her without a word, after what felt like forever. He stopped in front of a rusted metal grate. He pulled it open with a low groan of iron and motioned for her to enter. She hesitated, peering into the darkness. "It's safer than staying out here," he said, his voice calm but urgent. Inside, the air was damp and cool. The tunnel was narrow, lit only by faint streaks of moonlight slipping through cracks above. Their footsteps echoed softly. Kara kept glancing over her shoulder, certain that soldiers would come pouring in at any moment. The human walked ahead, his steps steady for a while. The only sound was the faint drip of water and the distant hum of machinery far above. Then Kara finally found her voice. "Why are you helping me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He didn't turn around because no one else will. He replied. Something about those words settled deep inside her. Her people had once treated humans with suspicion. They called them outsiders, troublemakers, untrustworthy. But tonight, under the cold stone and flickering shadows, a human was the only one standing between her and death. They moved deeper into the tunnel, somewhere ahead. Kara thought she saw a faint light, but before she could take another step, she heard it. The echo of footsteps, not theirs. These were faster, heavier, closing in from behind. Kara's heart leaped into her throat. "They're coming," she whispered, panic tightening her voice. The human turned, his eyes narrowing. "Stay behind me," he said firmly. Kara backed up until she felt the cold wall at her back, clutching her charm like a shield. The sound of boots grew louder. In that moment, she realized something. This night, the last night she might ever be free, was now in the hands of a human she barely knew. And for reasons she didn't understand, she trusted him. The tunnel seemed to stretch on forever. The air was cool and damp, carrying the smell of earth and old stone. Kara's footsteps were light, but every sound felt too loud in the silence. Behind them, the faint echo of boots still lingered, a reminder that danger was not far away. The human, Elias, walked ahead, his hand brushing the tunnel wall as if he knew every turn. His movements were quick but never rushed, steady like the flow of a deep river. Kara stayed close, afraid that if she let even a small gap grow between them, she would be lost in the dark. "Do you live down here?" she asked in a whisper. Elias shook his head, though she doubted he would have told her if he did. "This place is old," he said, his voice low. "Built long before your people or mine came to this city." Kara frowned, her curiosity mixing with fear. If it was that old, then who built it? She didn't ask, not wanting to slow him with questions. The tunnel sloped downward, and the ground became uneven. Elias moved carefully, pausing at corners to listen before continuing. He seemed to hear things Kara could not. Tiny shifts of air, faint sounds in the distance. More than once, he raised a hand for her to stop, then waved her forward when it was safe. Kara found herself studying him when she thought he wouldn't notice. His shoulders were broad, his steps sure, his voice steady. It was strange. She had never thought of humans as protectors, but tonight, that was exactly what he was. After several turns, the tunnel opened into a wider space. Pillars of stone rose from the ground to the ceiling, carved with symbols Kara didn't recognize. Dust covered everything, and cobwebs swayed in the faint breeze. Elias glanced around as if checking for something, then nodded. "This way," he said, pointing to a narrow gap between two pillars. Kara hesitated, looking at the small space. "It's tight," she said softly. "That's why they won't find us there." He replied. She squeezed through, her shoulders brushing cold stone. On the other side, the tunnel became even darker. Elias pulled a small device from his belt. Light bloomed from it, casting long shadows on the walls. The stone here was smoother, the air warmer, and she thought she could hear the faint sound of running water. Her legs ached from walking, but she kept going. She couldn't afford to be tired now, not with soldiers behind them. Finally, Elias slowed, pressing a hand to the wall. He traced the stone with his fingers until there was a soft click. Part of the wall shifted, revealing a hidden doorway. Kara stared in surprise. You knew this? Was here?" Elias gave a faint smile, the first she had seen from him. "I've been here before," he said, "and it kept me alive then, just like it will keep you alive now." They stepped through, and the wall slid shut behind them. The air in this passage was warmer still, carrying the scent of damp earth mixed with something metallic. Kara glanced back at the now invisible doorway, wondering if the soldiers would ever find it. She hoped not. The light from Elias's device revealed faint markings on the floor tracks, maybe left by others who had passed through here. Her mind filled with questions, but she stayed silent. Minutes passed in steady walking. Elias finally broke the quiet. "Those soldiers chasing you, they're not going to stop." Kara looked down, her grip tightening on the charm around her neck. "They never stop," she whispered. "They took my parents. My brother." Her voice cracked on the last word, and she bit her lip. Elias's gaze softened, though his tone stayed calm. "Then we make sure they don't take you." They walked on until the sound of rushing water grew louder. The tunnel ended in a wide underground chamber. A river of black water flowed through it. Shimmering faintly under the light, Kara's stomach nodded. Her people feared deep water, believing it was cursed. Elias noticed her hesitation and said, "We don't cross here, not yet." He pointed to a bridge made of old planks farther down. The wood looked weak, but it was the only way forward as they crossed. The boards creaked under their weight. Kara's eyes stayed fixed on the far side, refusing to look down halfway across. A sound froze her in place, the sharp echo of boots. The soldiers had found the passage. Elias didn't shout or panic. He gripped her arm and urged her forward, his pace quick but controlled. The bridge swayed. But they made it across just as shadows appeared on the far side. "They're closer than I thought," Elias muttered. He led her into another narrow tunnel, this one sloping upward. Kara's legs burned from the climb, but she pushed herself harder. The air grew cooler, fresher. Finally, they reached a point where faint daylight streamed through cracks in the stone. Elias slowed, turning. "To her, this next part is dangerous," he said. "But if we make it through, we'll be far ahead of them." Kara nodded. Though her heart pounded in her chest, she didn't know where he was taking her. She didn't know why he was helping, but one thing was certain: he had not let go of her hand since they entered the passage, and somehow, that small detail made her believe she might survive the night. The light from the cracks in the stone faded as they moved deeper. The tunnel was narrow now, forcing Kara to walk right behind Elias. Her hands brushed the rough wall and dust clung to her fingers. Every step echoed softly, reminding her they were not alone in this place. Somewhere behind, the faint sound of boots still followed. It was like a shadow that refused to let go. Kara's heart raced. She wanted to ask if Elias thought they could escape, but her throat felt tight instead. She listened to the steady sound of his breathing ahead. It was calm, controlled, like nothing in this chase could shake him. But when he stopped suddenly, her chest tightened. "What is it?" she whispered. He raised a hand, signaling for silence from the darkness behind. Voices echoed faintly. Not close enough to see, but close enough to hear. They were searching carefully now, calling out orders. Kara stepped closer to Elias, her fingers brushing his arm without thinking. He turned slightly, looking down at her. "They're gaining," he said quietly. "We need to make a stand." Her eyes widened. "You mean fight them?" Achilles' voice was steady. "I promised you safety, and I won't break it." The way he said it made her chest feel strange. Like it wasn't just a promise. It was something heavier, something unshakable. He drew a blade from his side. It wasn't sleek alien steel or a glowing energy weapon. It was simple metal, worn from use, yet the way he held it made Kara think it could cut through anything. He stepped back toward the narrow part of the tunnel. "Stay behind." "Me," he said again. The first shadow appeared at the edge of their light. A soldier's visor glinted. Then another stepped forward, weapons raised. Elias didn't wait. He moved fast. Faster than Kara thought a human could. Steel met metal with a sharp ring. The sound bounced off the tunnel walls, mixing with shouts. Kara pressed herself against the wall, her heart hammering. The fight was quick, but brutal. Elias's movements were clean. Every strike precise. 2 soldiers went down, their weapons clattering to the ground. The others hesitated, not expecting resistance here. Elias took the chance to grab Kara's hand. "Move," he ordered. They ran. The air felt heavier now, filled with the scent of metal and dust. Kara's legs burned. But she didn't slow. She glanced back once, seeing the soldiers hesitate before following again. "They won't give up," she panted. "They don't have to," Elias replied. "We just have to stay ahead." The tunnel sloped upward, the air becoming cooler. Kara could feel fresh. Wind on her face, it gave her hope. But Elias didn't slow until they reached a wide stone chamber. The ceiling here was high, with old carvings worn by time. In the center was a raised platform with a broken pillar. Elias led her behind it. Using the shadows for cover, they crouched low. Kara's breathing was fast, but Elias seemed as calm as ever. "You're not afraid?" she asked quietly. He glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "I've been afraid before," he said, "but not when I have a reason to fight." She didn't know if he meant her. But the thought made her chest warm. The voices of the soldiers faded a little. Elias took the moment to check her hands and arms for cuts. "You're shaking," he said softly. Kara looked down, realizing he was right. She wasn't sure if it was fear or something else. Maybe it was because, for the first time in days, someone cared if she was hurt. They stayed in the shadows until the footsteps grew distant. When Elias finally stood, Kara followed without question. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Somewhere they can't follow." He replied. She didn't know if such a place existed. But she believed him anyway. The passage beyond the chamber was different. The walls were smoother, the air warmer. Faint light glowed from small crystals embedded in the stone. Kara's eyes widened in wonder. "Who made this?" she whispered. "People who knew how to hide." Elias said simply, "For a while." They walked in silence. Kara's steps felt lighter now. Every so often, Elias would glance back to check on her. It wasn't the watchful look of someone guarding a prisoner. It was the look of someone making sure you made it home. When they reached another fork in the tunnel, Elias paused. He studied both paths before choosing the one on the right. "How do you know where to go?" Kara asked. "Because I've been lost before," he said, "and I learned the way out." Something in his tone told her he wasn't only talking about tunnels. As they moved deeper, Kara found herself gripping her charm less tightly. For the first time since her world fell apart, she didn't feel completely alone. The danger was still there. The soldiers were still hunting, but with Elias in front of her. Each step felt like a step toward something safer, something almost like hope. The tunnel finally ended in a small opening. Kara blinked against the sudden light, her eyes adjusting after the long darkness. She felt cool morning air brush her face, carrying the faint scent of pine. For a moment, it felt unreal, like she had stepped into another world. Behind them, the shadows of the underground seemed far away. But Elias didn't relax. He scanned the tree line ahead, every muscle tense. "This way," he said, his voice low but firm. They walked through a stretch of tall grass that swayed gently in the breeze. The sky above was pale, streaked with the first light of dawn. Kara's legs ached, but the open air felt like freedom. She could hear birds calling in the distance, something she hadn't heard since her village burned. Elias led her into a cluster of hills. Each one covered with thick green shrubs. Nestled between two hills was a small wooden structure. Its roof slanted and patched with metal sheets. It looked old, but sturdy. "This is the safe house," Elias said, stepping toward it. Kara hesitated, glancing around. "Is anyone here?" she asked. "No," Elias replied, "not anymore." He pushed the door open with a quiet creak. Inside, the air smelled faintly of dust and dried herbs. A single table sat in the corner, with two wooden chairs beside it. A cot with a folded blanket rested against the wall. It wasn't much, but to Kara, it felt like a palace compared to the cold ground she had slept on. Elias walked in first, checking each corner before letting her step inside. "You can rest here for a while," he said. Kara sank onto the cot, the blanket soft beneath her fingers. Her body wanted to sleep, but her mind wouldn't stop racing. "What will happen now?" she asked. Elias sat at the table, leaning back in his chair. "We wait until it's safe to move again," he said, though his tone made her wonder if he believed it himself. For a few precious minutes, The world outside felt far away. Kara sipped water from a small canteen Elias handed her. The cool liquid eased the dryness in her throat. She noticed the way Elias kept glancing toward the window. His hand rested loosely on the hilt of his blade. It was clear he might have called. This is safe house, but he didn't truly trust it. By midday, Kara's eyes grew heavy. She lay back on the cot. The sound of wind against the roof lulling her toward sleep for the first time in days. She felt warmth and comfort. Her breathing slowed. Her muscles relaxed. She almost forgot about the soldiers. Almost a sudden sound snapped her awake. It was faint, but sharp a crunch of gravel outside. Kara sat up, her heart pounding. Elias was already at the window, his eyes narrowing. "What is it?" she whispered. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he motioned for her to stay low, peering through the crack in the wooden shutters. Kara saw them, two figures moving between the hills, both armed. Their armor was different from the soldiers who had chased them earlier. These were bounty hunters. She froze when she noticed one of them holding a small hollow projector. Her own face flickered on it, a bounty notice glowing beneath. Kara's breath caught. "They found me," she whispered. Elias didn't move from the window. "They were always going to," he said quietly. "But they won't take you." There was no fear in his voice, only certainty. The hunters drew closer, their voices low but urgent. Elias backed away from the window, grabbing his gear. "Time to leave," he said, his tone calm as if they were simply going for a walk. Kara grabbed her charm and moved toward the door. "Where?" she asked. "Anywhere they aren't," he replied, before they could leave. The door rattled. Someone outside was testing the handle. Kara's heart leaped into her throat. Elias motioned for silence, then pointed toward the back wall. There was a narrow hatch partly hidden beneath an old rug. He lifted it, revealing a small escape tunnel that sloped downward. "In," he whispered. Kara slid inside, the earth cold under her hands. Elias followed. Closing the hatch quietly above them, they moved quickly, crawling at first before the tunnel widened enough to stand. Behind them, muffled voices filled the safe house the hunters had entered, their boots scraping against the wooden floor. Kara didn't look back. She kept her eyes on Elias's back, trusting him to lead her out. The tunnel ended in a thick patch of shrubs on the far side of the hill. They stepped out into open air again. Elias didn't slow until they were halfway. Down the slope, Kara glanced back, seeing faint movement near the safe house. "They'll follow," she said, her voice tight. "Then we keep moving." Elias replied. His tone was steady, but Kara could see the tension in his jaw. As they disappeared into the next stretch of hills, Kara realized something. The safe house had been nothing more than a brief pause. There was no place left where she could truly stop. Not yet, but if Elias was still with her, she thought maybe she could keep running for as long as it took. The hills narrowed into a deep valley. Trees lined the edges, their leaves whispering in the wind. Kara followed close behind Elias, her feet slipping on the damp ground. Somewhere behind them, the faint echo of voices still carried through the air. The bounty hunters were still on their trail. Elias's pace was steady but urgent, his eyes scanning ahead for a way out. Then Kara heard it, the roar of rushing water. It grew louder with each step until they rounded a bend. There it was, a wide, raging river cutting across the valley. The current was fast, churning with white foam. Kara froze at the sight. Her people feared deep water. They said it could swallow you whole and never give you back. Elias didn't stop. He walked straight to the edge, scanning for the safest point to cross. Kara's voice shook. We can't go through that." He turned to her, his eyes calm but firm. "If we stay here, they'll catch us," he said. "If we cross, they won't." The sound of voices behind them grew louder, closer. Kara's stomach twisted. She looked at the river again. It felt like choosing between drowning or being captured. Without another word, Elias stepped into the water. The current pulled at him immediately, but he kept his footing. He looked back at her. "Come on, Kara," he called over the roar. "I've got you." Her hands trembled as she stepped forward. The water was icy, biting into her skin. Each step made her legs shake, the current pushing harder. Halfway across, her foot slipped, the water surged, dragging her off balance. She gasped as the current pulled her under. Cold rushed into her ears, her lungs screaming for air. In the blur of swirling water, she felt a strong hand grab her wrist. Elias hauled her up, his arm locking around her as the river tried to tear her away. "Hold on to me," he shouted. She clung to him, coughing and shivering. Every step he took felt like a battle, but slowly they reached the far bank. Elias pulled her onto the grass, collapsing beside her for a moment to catch his breath. Kara's whole body shook, but she was alive. She lay on her side. Staring at the trees overhead, her chest rose and fell quickly. "You saved me," she whispered, her voice hoarse. Elias looked at her, his expression unreadable. "I told you I wouldn't let them take you," he said simply. They didn't. Have long to rest. Across the river, faint shapes appeared, bounty hunters scanning the bank. Kara's breath caught. "They're still following." Elias nodded. "But they won't risk the river like we did. Not right away." He stood and offered her a hand, pulling her to her feet. "We keep moving." The forest beyond the river was dense. Branches hung low, and roots twisted across the path. Elias moved quickly, choosing paths that kept them hidden under cover. Kara's wet clothes clung to her skin, making each step harder. Still, she didn't complain. She was starting to understand. Elias never slowed for himself, only for her. After an hour of walking, they reached a ridge that overlooked a wide stretch of forest. From here, the river curved far away, disappearing into the hills. Kara could see no sign of their pursuers for the first time since crossing. She let out a slow breath. Elias knelt beside her, scanning the horizon. "We'll head for the borderlands," he said. "It's harder for them to follow there." Kara nodded. Though her thoughts were still on the moment in the river, she had felt herself slipping away. And then his hand had been there, pulling her back. It wasn't just the rescue, it was the way he hadn't hesitated. Not for a second. The sun began to set, casting long shadows through the trees. Elias found a small hollow beneath a fallen tree where they could rest unseen. He built a small, smokeless fire, its glow barely lighting their faces. Kara sat close, wrapping herself in the blanket he carried. The warmth seeped slowly into her cold skin. Her eyes drifted to him as he sat, sharpening his blade. The steady scrape of metal on stone filling the quiet. After a long silence, she spoke. "You could have left me in the river," she said. Elias didn't look up. "I don't leave people," he replied. Kara lowered her gaze. No one had ever said something like that to her before. Not and meant it. The night grew colder, but Kara no longer felt the deep chill from the river. Instead, she felt something else, a small spark of trust. It scared her almost as much as the water had, because if she lost that, she didn't know if she could survive what was coming next. The borderlands lay ahead. Kara could feel the change in the air, colder, drier, with the faint smell of dust. The forest had thinned out, replaced by rocky ground and low shrubs. Far in the distance, a jagged wall of steel and stone marked the checkpoint. It was the last barrier between them and freedom. Elias stopped on a ridge, studying the outpost through a small scope. 2 towers stood on either side, their searchlights sweeping the open ground. Armed guards paced along the top. "This is it," Elias said quietly. "Once we're through, they can't touch you." Kara's stomach nodded. The open space between their hiding spot and the gate looked impossible to cross unseen. How? She asked. Elias lowered the scope, his eyes fixed on her. We'll walk through, he said. Her eyes widened. That's suicide, she whispered. Not if they think you're a prisoner, Elias replied. He pulled a length of cord from his pack and gently bound her wrists. The knot was loose enough she could free herself in seconds. Kara's heart pounded as he wrapped a worn cloak around her shoulders to hide most of her face. Keep your head down, he told her, and let me talk. The sound of his voice steadied her, even as her legs felt weak. They stepped out from the cover of the ridge and began walking toward the gate. Kara could feel the eyes of the guards on them. The crunch of gravel under their boots seemed louder than ever. A shout rang out from the wall. State your business. Elias raised one hand. Bounty delivery. He called back, his tone hard and confident. The guards muttered among themselves before one motioned for the gate to open slightly. As they stepped into the shadow of the wall, Kara could see the suspicion in the guard's eyes. One stepped forward, scanning a small device. Where's your proof? He demanded. Elias reached slowly into his coat, pulling out a worn data card. Kara realized it wasn't relit, was just a piece of metal shaped like one. But Elias's expression didn't waver. Check it if you want, he said flatly. The guard took it, frowning at the scratches on its surface. Another guard circled Kara, looking her up and down. Her heart pounded so hard she thought they might hear it. This one's worth a lot, the guard said. His voice full of greed. Too much for you to handle. Elias replied coldly. The man sneered. And what makes you think you can? He never finished. In one swift move, Elias shoved him back, knocking the weapon from his hands. The second guard raised his rifle, but Elias was faster. A sharp strike to the wrist sent it clattering to the ground. Run. Elias barked. Kara didn't hesitate. She slipped free of the loose cords and bolted toward the inner gate. Shouts erupted from the towers, boots thudding on metal. Elias was at her side in seconds, blocking another guard who lunged at her. The clang of weapons echoed off the steel walls. Kara ducked under a swinging baton, her hands finding the release lever on the smaller service gate. It groaned open just enough for her to slip through. Elias followed, kicking the gate shut. Behind them, they ran down a narrow corridor between the outer wall and the inner barricade. Sunlight spilled through a final archway. Kara could hear the guards regrouping behind them. Elias grabbed her hand and pulled her forward. The last barrier loomed ahead, a heavy steel gate locked with an electronic panel. Elias slammed his hand against the control pad, sparks flying. As he forced it open, the gate began to rise slowly, painfully slow. Bullets struck the wall near them. Kara dropped low, her breath ragged. Elias stepped in front of her, shielding her with his body until there was just enough space to crawl. Under, go. He shouted. She slid under the gate, rolling to her feet on the other side. Elias followed, grabbing her arm as they sprinted across the dusty, open ground. Behind them, the gate clanged shut. Sealing the checkpoint, the shouts grew fainter with each step. Kara didn't dare look back until the wall was nothing but a dark line on the horizon. Only then did she slow, her chest heaving. Elias stood beside her, his face calm despite the fight they had just escaped. You're through, he said simply. Kara stared at him, the reality sinking in. She was beyond the reach of the soldiers now. She was free, but more than that. She realized she was free because he had fought for her, because he had refused to leave her behind, no matter the risk. The desert wind was warm against Kara's skin. The hard ground crunched under their boots as they left the border wall far behind. The air felt different here, lighter somehow. She could see small hills in the distance, and, beyond them, a scattering of low buildings. It wasn't much, but to Kara, it looked like another world. No patrols, no searchlights, no metal gates blocking the way. Her legs wanted to give out. Every muscle ached from days of running, hiding, and fighting. But Elias kept walking, his steps steady, his eyes always scanning the horizon. Kara didn't know where exactly they were going. She didn't even care. Anywhere away from the voices that had haunted her nights was enough. By the time they reached the first rise, the sun was dipping low. The sky burned with streaks of gold. And deep orange Elias led her toward a cluster of weathered stone huts. Half buried in sand, they're abandoned. He said, "No one will bother us here." Inside one of the huts, the air was cool, the walls thick enough to block the wind. He set down his pack and began checking the place for danger. Kara sank to the floor, her back against the wall. Her fingers played with the charm around her neck without thinking. She watched Elias move. Every motion was careful, but not rushed. Even here, where there was no sign of danger, he acted as if something could appear at any moment. When he was finally satisfied, he sat across from her, resting his arms on his knees. They were quiet for a long time. The only sound was the faint whistle of the wind through the doorway. Kara's voice broke the silence. "Why did you help me?" Elias looked at her, his expression calm but unreadable. "I couldn't leave you there," he said simply. She shook her head. "You didn't know me. You risked everything." He shrugged lightly. "You needed help." It was such a simple answer, but it made her chest feel heavy. She looked down at the charm in her hands. "My brother had one like this," she said softly. "They took him. I don't even know if he's alive." Her voice wavered, and she blinked back the sting in her eyes. Elias's voice was steady. "Then you keep it. You remember him. And you keep moving forward." Kara met his gaze. There was no pity in his eyes, only strength, and somehow that was better. As night fell, Elias built a small fire in the corner, its light dancing on the walls. Kara sat close to it, letting the warmth chase away the last of the river's chill from her bones. Outside, the desert was silent. No footsteps, no shouts, no engines in the distance. For the first time in days, maybe weeks, she felt her body begin to truly relax. After they ate a small meal from Elias's pack, Kara leaned back against the wall. Her eyelids felt heavy, but she fought sleep for a moment longer. She wanted to be sure this was real, that when she woke, she wouldn't be back in a cell or running through the dark. Elias seemed to sense her hesitation. "You can sleep," he said quietly. "I'll keep watch." She hesitated, then asked, "Will they still come for me?" Elias looked into the fire, his jaw set. "Not here," he said. "Not while I'm with you." Something in the way he said it made the fear inside her loosen its grip. She leaned her head against the wall. The fire's warmth and the steady sound of his breathing pulled her toward sleep. Just before her eyes closed, she heard him move. His voice was low, almost a whisper. "You're safe now." The words wrapped around her like a blanket, and for the first time since her world had been torn apart, Kara let herself believe them when she woke in the morning. Sunlight streamed through a crack in the wall. Elias was still awake, sitting by the doorway, his blade resting across his knees. She felt an odd sense of peace, not because the danger was gone, but because she knew she wouldn't face it alone anymore. Kara stood, brushing dust from her clothes. "Where will we go now?" she asked. Elias glanced back at her with the faintest hint of a smile. "Wherever you want," he said. Her chest tightened not with fear, but with a strange, fragile feeling of freedom. Outside, the desert stretched wide and endless. Kara stepped into it, her charm resting warm against her skin. Elias walked beside her, silent but steady. They didn't know what waited ahead, but she knew one thing. Whatever came next, she would not be alone.